My name is Miguel Diaz, and I am an immigrant from El Salvador. And I really want to thank you for this opportunity to share with you a really bad experience because this immigration system is broke and needs to be repaired. Back in 2007, I was trying to legalize my wife's status, and immigration agents came to my house, raided my house, and took her into custody. Took my wife into custody. And the worst thing is they did it in front of my two young children. Can you imagine the trauma that my two little ones are facing now? The trauma that they are going through is horrible. From my experience, I was proved that we cannot be silent. There is a Thank you. There is injustice in this country, and we got to fight. We got to fight together because together we can make change happen. And we put it on November 4th when we elect Barack Obama President of the United States. Tonight, it's a pleasure for me to introduce a fighter, a man who fights, a champion who fights for the whole families, for the whole working people, for health care, for right at work, for immigration rights, for economic issues. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Congressman Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you, Miguel. 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 Are we going to make sure that nobody else in America, no other family in America has to go through what Miguel and his family went through? We are. We are. On November 4th, all of you and the American people made history in this country and sent a signal around the world by electing Barack Obama as our next president of the United States. That was a historic day. We all know, and as Barack Obama himself has said, now is the time that the real work begins. Now is the time to, as this conference has said, realize the promise. And even though Election Day has passed and the election is over, the movement and the campaign must continue day after day after day until we make sure we get the change and realize that promise. Now, what Barack Obama did by enlisting the American people in the last campaign was he brought so many millions of Americans who had been on the political sidelines into the political process. He expanded the great circle of our democracy. And people answered that call to change, fed up with the last 4 years, said we have a better vision of America, both in terms of what we do here at home and what we do around the world. And as he has said, in order for all of us to be successful, we've got to make sure that Election Day was just not one day out of the year. It's not a day where you come to the ballot box and go home and say, now it's up to everybody else to figure out how to solve these problems, right? Because if we're going to solve these problems, we need everybody who went out to vote for change on Election Day to keep working for change day after day after day. Because we know We know the forces of the status quo are very strong. There are a lot of people who are going to fight very hard just to keep things the way they are or the way they were. And if we're going to overcome those forces of status quo, we need everybody who got out and vote for change to keep working for change. We need all of you to make sure that you're calling your members of Congress. I have the great privilege of representing the 8th Congressional District in Maryland. We have a lot of Marylanders here. And we have people from around the country in Congress who look forward to working with President-elect Obama and his new administration in the cause for change. But we're going to need your help. We're going to need your help knocking on the doors of every member of Congress and answering the call as we go forward, because if we're going to have an economy that works for Main Street and not just there for Wall Street, we need to be hearing from everybody on Main Street. We need to be hearing from Main Street every day. And if we're going to mend our health care system, which, as we know, is severely broken, 53 million Americans who don't have health care, it's a shame in this country. But if we're going to fix that broken health care system, we're going to need the campaign for change to make sure it continues, because we saw what happened in the past when people tried to make health reform happen. We're going to need everybody in this room going home. And if we're going to fix our broken immigration system that Miguel talked about, we're going to need to hear from people from coast to coast, from west to east and north to south. And if we're going to make sure we realize that dream, the dream that so many in the past fought for, if we're going to realize that dream, we need to work together. And I know, working together, we can make sure we enact things like the DREAM Act to make sure that everybody that's just simple fairness and decency. Isn't it great to have somebody who was a community organizer as President of the United States? Well, the President-elect understands the power of community organizing. He understands the power that each of you has. You should look at the front page of the Washington Post today. If you haven't seen it, the front page, there's an article. There's an article about how, in order to enact health care reform, this administration understands that it needs to harness the energy that it harnessed in the campaign. And already, the new incoming Secretary of Health and Human Services, Senator Tom Daschle, he's going to be a great Secretary of Health and Human Services. He was on the phone already today, just yesterday, with activists from around the country enlisting their support in this effort. And I'm confident that if we harness that energy and make sure we heed the call, not just to go out on Election Day and then go home and camp out at home for the next 4 years, but go out and every day make sure we continue to be engaged in this process, as so many of you are, as our friends from Maryland are, as Miguel, who's worked with Casa de Maryland and their great leader, Gustavo Torres. If we all do that, then I am absolutely confident that when Barack Obama said during the campaign, "Yes, we can," that we will convert that in the next 4 years, in the next 8 years, across this country into "Yes, we will." We will change America, and we will make sure we realize the promise. Make sure that when you go home, you continue to talk to your friends and your neighbors and your community organizers and your community leaders and everybody who has a stake in this great nation of ours and a stake in a more peaceful and prosperous world, that we have an obligation, each and every one of us, to make sure that we continue to work for that change that we so desperately need. And I'm confident that with your help, the United States Congress will work with the new President of the United States, Barack Obama, to get the job done. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're going to do.